Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. We are a podcast devoted to founders, entrepreneurs, and startups, and the angels, VCs, family offices, and investment firms that help them reach whatever status they can or whatever their potential might promise. Remember, you can subscribe to us and also give us a rating on all the major podcast platforms. That's Apple, Amazon, Audible, Spotify, and I think about six others. So please do that. You can also find us on YouTube. And remember, I'm at Michael Conniff on Twitter, MichaelConniff, and michaelconniff.com is my website. We are joined today by a very exciting young founder, Brian Cordero. I'm assuming, Brian, you're not an old guy because you look young, but Brian is the founder and CEO of Greenclick Technologies, which is doing its best to disrupt a very specific space in the car rental industry. So welcome aboard. Great to have you, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be on board, talk to you, Michael, and kind of discuss exactly what we're doing at Greenclick, kind of disrupting over-the-counter desks with technology.
Yeah, well, tell us. Let's start right there. What exactly are you doing with Greenclick, and where are you in the game? So at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I'm the founder and CEO of Greenclick Technologies. Essentially, what we're building is the world's first self-serve and contactless rental company at hotels and directly at hotels. So in the U.S. today, out of 76,000 hotels, less than 1% actually offer on-site rental services. So some of my first questions were kind of like, okay, why is that? So generally, when you look at the on-site venues, they usually have like a 300 by 300 square foot room. They usually have about 2 employees that usually man the station. And when they do operate, they operate around from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So kind of looking at how like franchise companies kind of like operate, there's a lot of disruption that can happen with technology. And so essentially what I've created is the world's first 24/7 valet box. Essentially, it's like a centralized key management solution for guests. So essentially, like there are franchise companies like Hertz and Avis that usually so yeah, Avis is is one of those large competitors that have adopted a significant market share for a very long time. Now you have other market competitors now in the space that have kind of initiated kind of a jumpstart in this technology space for rental cars, and that was Turo, Get Around, companies like those. And so even with digital keyless entry, which we can use, essentially what we've done is, and even with digital keyless entry, you still have to have a lockbox in the car to still have the keys within the box. So essentially what we're doing is pretty much just centralizing the whole key management solution, and then kind of embedding it into the customer experience when they do start to rent out from our system. But with this being
let me just forgive me for interrupting, but I want you to walk me through this. I walk into a hotel in downtown Chicago. I walk in knowing that I can rent a car there. So what do I just see your lockbox? Do I see people? What kind of cars do I get? Walk me through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, you'd be able to reserve your mobile app. You'd be able to reserve the car on your mobile application. There's a lot of things that align with what cars we're offering and how the service works. But to start, of course, you reserve your car, and it would be like an electric first vehicle. And so at that point in time, you reserve the car, you go to the lobby, you're able to see the valet box. You go ahead, you input it onto the touchscreen, or you input your code, your reservation code onto the touchscreen, or you can snap a QR code. Your information will pop up, and then once you confirm it, the individual latch opens up, and then you can grab your keys, essentially. With that being said, then you can now kind of enjoy your trip without having to talk to any of the guests, and pretty much work within Greenclick, and then come back and do a two-step checkout process, which is you take 6 pictures of the car just so that for verification of your own purposes, and then also dropping off the key box, ending your trip. And that's kind of how the system goes. But in the middle of that system, we also are focusing on something else within the platform. And so it's like, when you do go to these venues and you do go to these hotels, hotels know their locations best. And so on our mobile application on the footer, you have your summary of your trip, but on the second button you have the events. You have events that are happening locally around town. So now when you do enjoy the trips, you kind of get to see the restaurants, you get to see any concerts, you get to actually know what the nightlife is going within kind of like the mode of transportation. And with that, we basically partner with some of the best, restaurants, hotels, concerts to kind of like explode, like to create a really good experience. I mean, you're going to a hotel, right? So it's like, we're just doubling down on that experience, and making sure that we can like provide some of the best experiences possible.
So when I drop your keys into the, do I drop them into a mailbox? Do I have to bring them back? How does it? I have to bring the car back, right?
Yeah,
Or is
absolutely.
bring it back, bring the keys back, and then plug them back into your system?
Yeah, of course. Essentially, you grab the keys directly at each individual lockbox, and then and then the car is parked on site at the hotel premises. So the car is always going to be at the hotel parking lot. And then once you come back, you go back to the box, you drop off the keys, and then you end the summary
You're back in the
with it
hotel. Now, are
within
they
the
going to
hotel.
be your cars? This sounds kind of expensive. Are you going to have your own fleet?
So that goes back to the question, are we going to be an asset like, tech enabled platform, or are we going to be more or less, a very capital intensive business? And with some of our go to market strategies, that goes back to like where we are right now, and kind of like where prospective hotels are, essentially. To as a slightly bootstrap but very very considered company for funding, we really want to make sure that we can generate revenue, that we can situate ourselves um, as bootstrapped as possible before we go ahead and start raising a significant amount of funding. But right now, what we're doing is we're leveraging automotive partners and bringing their vehicles into our system, into our platform.
So
Remaining. Mhm.
what would be an automotive part? What would be an automotive partner? Give me an example.
uh, so I mean, we have a letter of intent signed with a micro mobility company. I can't say the name just yet, but
A micro,
essentially,
but somebody who has a bunch of cars.
yeah, essentially those we hope to work directly with automotive manufacturers because of the fact that hotels are such a very traveled place. It is a very consumer saturated market. And so what's really funny is that today, electric vehicles are now starting to be driven like, some of the first people are driving Teslas for the first time, right? And so when we start to bring these electric cars onto our fleet and start in these hotels, we're finding ways to continue to to leverage these automotive partners with our ecosystem of hotels and this like consumer saturated area, and being like, hey, Mr. Automotive Partner, I can I can enable people to drive your car, as this significant shift to EVs is happening, as people start to drive their first Teslas and things like that. Um, and uh, and 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 as I am the executive chair of mobility and future cities over at Stanford, one of the biggest things that we talk about is that first person drive with automotive vehicles. So in terms of time, and in terms of what a lot of hotels can benefit from this service, and guests as well, of course. Um, there's a lot of synergies directly with automotive manufacturers with our tech enabled automotive platform.
And have you signed up any hotels? And where will you do the first, the pilot? I guess as I imagine you're thinking about.
Yeah, so right now we do have about like five hotels interested in using our platform. We are the hotels are interesting in how they work because they can either be a one owned property, or generally some hotel owners will have like more of a portfolio. Um, there's certain so when we come to a hotel, we're basically like, hey, we're a wonderful concession for your hotels. This is a great feature, this is a great amenity. And what's really great and amazing about GreenClick is that as a 24/7 and self-serve and contactless rental company, we can be a lot more we can be a lot more like trusted on, as kind of like that on-site rental concession, because again, they're only open from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So it's like now that we can kind of expand these doors, you can really solidify this partnership, and again provide like a like a direct and always consistent rental service. And again, every core business has solved those rentals. But what we're looking to do right now with our automotive partners is leverage our first hotel for a great launch in January. And at that point, be able to deploy our micromobility vehicles, and then as well as using our tech-enabled platform, and again having a successful launch, so that we can go ahead and be like, hey, go to our investors and be like, hey, look, this is our next go to market. This is our go to market strategy. We're able to, yeah. So we're looking.
But micro mobility, are you talking about something other than a car? Are you talking about scooters and things like that?
Yeah, well, we wouldn't want to call it. We wouldn't want to call it just like complete like Bird and Lime competitors. But this vehicle that we've kind of like taken a look at is very interesting, because it's not completely like small micromobility, but it's not completely autonomous. And some things to kind of like to some of the concepts between like urbanization, like urban development in larger cities. The larger cities and vehicles, they're not really kind of like they don't really like each other. Autonomous vehicles or vehicles and larger cities, right? So it's kind of like that commerce in larger cities has to be smaller vehicles, or they kind of have to disappear altogether. As you can see, like a lot of European countries and things like that, they completely eliminate like the large commerce roads, but for like trucks and things like that. But in the U.S., like that's a completely different story, because of really how we've been cemented with the auto industry.
And how did you personally, Brian? How did you get interested in this space? It's kind of it's an interesting space, but certainly you're playing. You're a bit of a flea on the back of a couple of elephants at the moment, which nothing wrong with that. That's how many great ideas have started. But what was it about this? Is this your first startup? Have you done this before? And what about this made you want to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really interesting question. Really, it all stemmed from getting a parking ticket. Actually, like I'm not lying either. Like
that's great.
Yeah, it really did. So I was a senior in high school at U High, which is University High School. Basically, there is a side of the road where you'd have to pay $50 for a parking pass, right? So instead of like kind of parking inside, what I do is like I'd park on the side, and it was cool. I did that for like successfully for a full semester. But the first day, the second semester, I'd gotten a parking ticket. So like it got me. It had me started thinking like how many people are getting parking tickets, things like that. And then ultimately, like I had wanted to kind of like develop like this ultimate like company that was like encompassing of Uber. It was encompassing of her like of rentals and things like that. And then when I started to kind of like start my journey, like I went to LA, and I started realizing like I was sitting down having a coffee chat with someone, and they're pretty much telling me like you have to add on an additional 45 minutes to get on oh man, there's a very long street, but essentially you'd have to add an additional 45 minutes. So like kind of like journeying out there, experiencing LA and experiencing a bunch of other like traffic and things like that. I started to realize like in the rental industry, there is a significant market that can be defined. And so that's essentially what I was like, hey, this is a large opportunity, a significant, not first to the market opportunity, but first to scale. And again, once again, be able to solve a lot of core problems, and again, be able to solve a significant amount of travel discrepancies when getting from like the airport to the hotel, and a lot of that can be seen.
And you were very excited when we spoke today, because you have a new hire. So tell us about that, because I think this is the kind of thing that's very significant for a startup, but it's fair to say most people, it's not something you necessarily would hear about. But tell us why you're excited.
Well, that's actually and startup hires are incredibly interesting, right? Like Greenclick, or at least for our founding team, like finding your technical co-founder is one of the biggest challenges, I think, for all startups abroad, right? I met Sahil, and me and Sahil have been friends for about 9 months, and
What's his full name? Tell us his full name.
oh, Sahil Science. So Sahil is a full stack developer over at is a full stack developer in Canada. But we've been friends for so long, and then kind of like started reeled him in, and he really loves Greenclick, and so pretty much he's a full stack developer and knows everything. Like our backend is developing Go, and so like Go is like a step up from JavaScript. Of course, I'm not the technical guy, but the infrastructure that we've already kind of set up is pretty already kind of extenuates like how significant our talents are. But essentially, right? Finding that marriage with the co-founder, I think, is incredibly important. And so Matt Zhang, kind of onboarding him is going to be incredibly important once we start to kind of like understand how his growth and scale is going to affect Greenclick. Once we start to kind of like already saturate one location, then we can go ahead to the next. And so and so like if we do kind of take on like an asset light business model up to a more debt level model. A lot of investor trust has to be within us to be able to kind of like manage all these cash flows and again like be able to make sure that that we're able to again maintain ourselves while we scale and grow quickly.
Yeah, well, good for you. Now, before I let you go, tell me about your work at Stanford. Which did you go to Stanford yourself?
I didn't go to Stanford. I thought about taking a couple classes. I was just introduced to the V Lab group through a friend. He was a staff engineer over at Facebook, and he was like, "Hey, you should join this," and so I did. So essentially, right? Like I came into the first meeting, to like the monthly meeting, and essentially what V Lab is it's a not for profit, essentially for like to bring in like thought leaders and really have a very insightful and intellectually like discussing discussion. And so with Greenclick or with me essentially, I came in like, hey, I have some great ideas for like mobility, again, commerce. There's a lot of exciting things that's happening with the the shift EVs, the largest historic transition of automotive, sleeping giants like Ford, Jim Farley, focusing on different types of online sales, and Mercedes cutting 25% of dealerships. This is a significant time in the automotive industry that should be captured. And so something that I put it kind of relative to is kind of like Bitcoin when it's at like 17,000. So like that's kind of like some of the aspects that I kind of take a look at. And so like, essentially I'm basically the executive chair of mobility and future cities over at Stanford, where we get to kind of like bring in this amazing discussion. And right now we do have some very world-renowned experts, for the shift EVs to discuss about that electrification shift.
Oh, this sounds directly related to what you're doing with Greenclick. Is that right?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And I mean, and that's the thing. Like, Greenclick was a lot of aspects of urban development, of commerce, of hospitality, of all these ideas, pretty much kind of like bringing it together. And so when we talk about the shift EVs, it basically helped me insight and bring clarity to the market, especially as VLab is a very mature network, with a lot of automotive partners, with a lot of the industry leaders in the market when it comes to even buses and multi-passenger vehicles and such.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to wish you all the best. I want to thank you for being with us today on the Accelerator, and would love to keep track of your progress as you roll along. Maybe when we get to your pilot city, we can even rent a car. Tell you what it was like.
Absolutely, I promise. My service is literally going to be the best. If like, I will go out of my way to make sure that you have the best experience possible. That is without a doubt what I will make sure to happen. So, yeah, glad to take you out on a trip once we launch at a hotel and make sure that you're all accounted for.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for being with us, Brian. I want to thank everybody for being with us on the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. We are a podcast available on all the major platforms: Apple, Amazon, Audible, anything with an A, and then a bunch of others, including Spotify, also on YouTube. I think this might be our 40th that we've published. We've done, I think, something like 50 in all. So we're beginning to reach a certain mass in this podcast. But this has been very interesting. It shows you that startups are always a challenge, but an idea that certainly, if it worked, would be a big idea. So best of luck to you, Brian, and thanks again for being a guest.
Thank you, Michael.
And thanks for joining us. This is the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. We'll be back with another podcast before you know it.